Hi there everyone, my name is Rebecca McConnell. I am an architect and PhD candidate at Queen's University Belfast, and today I'm going to talk you through my presentation on how can architects serve the climate crisis. So a little bit about my research. I started looking at climate change and its effects on our architecture and built environment back in 2016 during my master's. And then whenever I finished my master's, went into practice, and I've decided that because the topic's so close to my heart that I've decided to come back and follow through, continue with my research on the topic. My research methodology is research by design, which basically means that at the end of my PhD, I'll have a series of design outcomes. And that'll be my method that I choose to follow through with my research. So resources, I use a series of different resources. These range from books to podcasts, to TV shows, documentaries. I even have one that I just keep sort of on my desk, the second one in there, that I just read whenever to have on my person. And why am I doing it? The things that we're facing at the minute, the global risks in terms of impact and likelihood for 2020. You can see a lot of them, the trend there is that a lot of them are green. They're all environmental, the majority of them are environmental, and they're to do with biodiversity loss, extreme weather, and climate action failure. So in order to look at this in a sort of critical manner, I need to look at other topics such as urbanisation, because it's going to be the cities that are affected by these climate change consequences. So by the year 2050, it said that 2/3 of us will live in an urban environment, which has never happened before. Whether or not the coronavirus changes that statistic, I'm not sure. So the consequences of climate change are all your sort of obvious answers. So you have your sea level rise, temperature increase, and demographic shift, along more. And we're really faced with a crisis that threatens our survival as a species, and yet we're continuing to act in the exact manner that has caused the crisis. So sea level rise is something that I started researching in my master's, and you can see that every continent is going to be affected by it. And obviously, particularly in Europe, that's something that I sort of zoomed in at in the more micro scale. And in the island of Ireland, all the major cities in the island of Ireland will be affected by sea level rise. And you can see here on these maps that accounts for 35% of the island's population. So everyone will be extremely affected by it. So why are we not doing anything about this problem? Climate change is defined as a wicked problem. So what is a wicked problem? It's a complex issue. It defies definition. There's no final solution. Any resolution generates further issues. And it said that the solutions cannot be true or false, good or bad, but the best that can be done at the time, which is something that I'm channeling in my own research. So just whenever I was trying to explain in terms of a diagram how complex the issue is, I created this climate change wheel. So you can see the topics coming off climate change, and then each topic has its own subtopics, and everything's sort of interconnected. And once you bring one of the elements of the subtopics into the center, so for example cities and urbanisation, you can see that it spawns its own series of issues beyond that. And on the right hand side here, I've just shown where there's overlaps, and you can see just how complex the issue of climate change really is, especially when it's meshed together with cities and urbanisation. So design is said to be a solution for a wicked problem. because it's playful, it's iterative, and it sort of has a fluidity. It can go between being very specific or generic, and it really engages with the messiness of everyday life. So that's something that I'm going to bring forward into as a method to sort of solve a wicked problem or help a wicked problem, as it were. At the minute, I'm looking at the city of Dublin. So you can see here a diagram just showing sort of worst case scenario sea level rise and how it will be affected. And one of the approaches that I'm taking to in my design is a temporal approach. So looking at the architectural solution over time, and looking at different things like the jobs that will be created, how we're going to be living our lives, and from that, you can see that people are going to be displaced, and they have this element of memory and nostalgia. Because architecture has the ability to summon memories, to induce nostalgia, and even trigger emotional reactions. So we have to keep in mind this sense of place whenever we're looking at climate refugees. So representation, I'm not sure if you can tell, but throughout my presentation, all these drawings have sort of been my own, and they're my way of sort of representing my design solutions and assessing the problem. And I always find it's a really sort of methodical way of working through the problem and coming up with an answer. And in order to do this, you have to be a little bit of a futurologist, because obviously you're looking into what's going to be happening, how we're going to be living. And this image on the right here, zoomed in, is actually one that I created in 2017, but it's very apt at the minute. It's looking at quarantine and this idea that whenever you're displaced, you're placed into quarantine. So how I'm recording my research is on a blog called The Future Blueprint. And this is just something, it's quite personal to me, but it is accessible, and it sort of just is a way of me archiving a lot of my writing and drawings, and just from that I wanted to say thanks for listening, and the link to the blog there is at the bottom, and my email address is just above it. And if you have any questions or anything else, don't hesitate to give me a shout. Thank you.